The band Warrant shot to popularity in the late 80s, but like a lot of groups who ruled the Sunset Strip, they fell victim to a changing musical scene despite their attempts to blend in. Not only that, but they were hampered by infighting and label troubles. It ultimately ended with tragedy. Today, let's take a look at Warrant's rise and fall with frontman Jani Lane, specifically focusing on their first 3 records. Born in Akron, Ohio, and the youngest of 5 children, frontman Jani Lane was born John Kennedy Oswald in 1964. His parents were big supporters of President John F. Kennedy, who had been killed the previous year. At first, they didn't realize the irony of having Kennedy and Oswald in their child's name. They eventually renamed their son John Patrick Oswald. It was at the age of 6 their son picked up the drums and became well known to his neighbors, playing the kit night and day. As young as 11, he started playing gigs with his older brother Eric in cover bands as part of the Cleveland music scene, including in groups named Red Buckles and Touchstone. Lane soon adopted the stage name Mitch Dynamite, doing gigs at venues like Red Pepper Steakhouse and Brown Derby. Surprisingly, some of his biggest influences early on in his life were performers like Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly, and Danny Kaye. He even got into musical theater in high school and at one point was offered a scholarship to Kent State. Lane admitted that he got made fun of for being into musical theater, so he tried to balance it out by playing sports, including football, which he was a pretty gifted player. He even turned down a football scholarship. It was around the age of 12 that he got into guitar and started writing songs. And despite showing a lot of promise in both musical theater and sports, at the end of the day, rock music was his true passion. It was in Ohio that he befriended another musician, future Warrant drummer Stephen Sweet, who recalled meeting the musician in the book Nothing But a Good Time. Jani Lane and I grew up in rural towns that were about 40 minutes from each other in Ohio, south of Cleveland. The first time I met him was around 1982, long before we moved to Los Angeles and joined up with the guys who started Warrant out there. He was playing drums in a band with my brother. He added that Jani was a good drummer, a natural player, and he was one of those guys who did a little bit of everything. That band that Lane was playing in at the time was called Crack the Sky. While Lane was playing drums in the group, they did let him out behind the kit to perform a few songs every now and then. It was at one of the Crack the Sky gigs that Lane met a bassist named Al Collins, with him recalling, "I was a fan, so I introduced myself to him," referring to Lane at a show, and found out he lived around the corner. I started going over to his house pretty regularly with my bass, and we do these epic bass and drum instrumentals in his garage. During these jam sessions, Lane played some of the songs he had written on acoustic guitar for Collins that impressed him so much that he thought the pair should form their own band. They soon started a new group with Lane fronting the group, an outfit called Dorian Gray. The band also included that friend of Lane, drummer Stephen Sweet, and his brother on guitar, as well as, of course, Al Collins on bass. But the lineup only lasted a few weeks, with Lane being too shy to step out completely from behind the drum kit, and so the group had to look for a new singer. Sweet, for his part, ended up moving to Connecticut after high school, giving Lane the opportunity to become the drummer, and for the next year, the band played the local circuit before moving south to Florida. The move to Florida resulted in Al Collins also leaving the group. After a year in the Sunshine State, Lane quit Dorian Gray to work on new material and front a new group, and offered his old friend Stephen Sweet the chance to be his drummer, which he agreed to. This was the beginning of the group Plain Jane. During this period, the members of Plain Jane were really into popular rock magazines, including Hit Parader and Circus, which profiled the bands from Los Angeles who were getting signed. It became apparently clear to the budding musicians that if they wanted to have a career in music, they needed to move out west, which they did in 1985. Like a lot of up-and-coming musicians, Lane took odd jobs, making a living, at one point even working at an adult video warehouse. Warrant was born out of a band called Quest that was fronted by a guy named Adam Shore, who also played bass and grew up with a drummer named Max Asher. The pair had met in high school, and they had a guitar player named Scott, and also featured future Foo Fighters keyboardist Rami Jaffe. The band eventually changed their name to Quadrant before becoming Warrant. And the band's name was inspired by an unlikely place, Rat guitarist Warren DeMartini, with Max Asher coming up with the name. This version of Warrant recorded a demo at a place named Pittman Studios. By this point, Warrant hadn't even played a single gig yet. Eventually, Adam Shore and Max Asher departed the group and formed their own band with some members from another band called Mickey Knight. The remaining members of Warrant, which included guitarist Eric Turner and bassist Jerry Dixon, opted to keep the name for themselves and joined up with the members of Plain Jane, thus creating the classic lineup of Warrant, and they soon added second guitarist Joey Allen. With their lineup now in tow, the members soon got day jobs, except for Lane, who focused solely on songwriting. Those early days for the group were tough. Lane told Florida Today, "We starved like every other band. When we first got to LA, we bought a jar of peanut butter and used Steve's social security card to spread it on the bread. Later, we wised up and started buying Chunky." The band also had some rules like not allowing women into their apartments unless they brought groceries with them. Warrant played club shows around LA and advertised themselves as being, and I quote, "the horniest band in LA." Another one they used was "the horniest band this side of Pluto," as well as $10 all you can eat. So of course, with taglines like these, along with scantily clad women on posters, it got a lot of people's attention. On top of that, they had women come up on stage and perform lewd acts on the band members during shows. Eric Turner added, "We offended a lot of people. A lot of people thought we were perverted. Everything we did, though, was tongue-in-cheek in a funny kind of way." The band was soon selling out shows and setting attendance records in the early days. One of the people Warrant got on the radars of was musician Prince. Prince got connected to Warrant through the group's manager. He offered them $5,000 to make a 3-song demo tape for his label, Paisley Park Records. On that demo was the song Down Boys, which was a big single from their debut record. The condition that Prince had, though, was that he had the first right of refusal. According to Ultimate Classic Rock, Prince ultimately invoked it after watching live footage of the band. Discussing frontman Jani Lane, Prince reportedly said, "This white kid can sing, and the band has potential, but can't dance." Prince, however, gave the band his blessing for them to take that demo tape and shop it around to different labels. Warrant soon became a big draw in the club scene, also in part due to their audience interactions, breaking down the barriers between the band on stage and the people in the crowd. Lane admitted, "We kicked down the barriers between ourselves and the audience. I spend half of my time at the shows in the crowd, tasting their drinks, making sure they're having fun." Even once Warrant started playing major tours, they frequently told the audience where they'd be hanging out after the shows, and some fans would show up and they'd drink and play pool together. Even before releasing their first album, they were already getting rave reviews from some publications including Kerrang!, Metal Edge, Rock Scene, and Blast. As the 80s came to a close, Warrant was selling out clubs in LA, but most record labels wouldn't touch him. They figured that the market for the type of music that Warrant was playing was too saturated. The band started to freak out. Nearly all of their peers were already signed, and the door felt like it was closing. It was an executive from CBS and Columbia Records named Brett Hartman who eventually signed the band, recalling, "Jani was such a great singer. They had great songs and they were amazing live. And it wasn't like they were doing anything new, but they were really good at what they do." Columbia enlisted producer Beau Hill to work on their debut album. The resulting record was 1989's Dirty, Rotten, Filthy, Stinking Rich. It's long been rumored that guitarist Eric Turner and Joey Allen did not at all play on the album, and that ex-Streets guitarist and session musician Mike Slamer is the one who played on the record. Slamer's wife even confirmed in an interview that her husband did in fact play on the album, while producer Beau Hill confirmed this as well, adding, "The songs are really great, but I think we're a little weak in the solo department, and so I'd like to bring someone in." Hill went on to state, "Everybody in the band signed off on it, and everything was done above ground." The album's release, however, was initially delayed after frontman Jani Lane suffered a nervous breakdown after walking in on his girlfriend and his best friend together in bed. The incident was captured on the band's follow-up album Cherry Pie on the song I Saw Red.
Saw red when I closed the door.
It produced a slew of singles in Down Boys, Heaven, Big Talk, and Sometimes She Cries. Down Boys, the first single, peaked at number 27 on the Hot 100 chart and 13 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The second single, the ballad Heaven, was the biggest song on the record, peaking at number 2 on the Hot 100 chart and number 3 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. Years later, the group New Found Glory covered the song. Big Talk, the third single, peaked at number 30 on the mainstream rock tracks chart and 93 on the Hot 100. Fourth and final single, Sometimes She Cries, peaked at number 20 on the Hot 100 chart and 11 on the mainstream rock tracks chart.
Big talk is just Top Gun, unless you're backing it up. And she cries, she's alone at night.
The record ended up going double platinum in America, and after Jani Lane received his first paycheck from his record label, he spent it all on a sports car, which he later totaled. Warrant went on to become one of the biggest success stories of 1989. The media during this time liked to focus a lot on the group's hard partying image. Warrant spent a blistering 18 months on the road promoting the record, playing alongside 15 or so acts, including Poison, Motley Crue, and Rat. So what was it that people loved about Warrant? Well, Turner told the Omaha World Herald, "I think all the songs come from the heart and people can relate to that. I think we're just all American boys and a lot of people can relate to things that we relate to." Following their first major tour, that the band hit the studio almost immediately without much of a break. They had road tested some of the music that appeared on their sophomore effort while opening for Motley Crue. They opened a lot of their shows with Uncle Tom's Cabin, one of the more harder rocking tunes in the repertoire that was well received by audiences. After getting off the road, the band headed to Hawaii for 2 weeks to do some pre-production work with producer Beau Hill. But these sessions resulted in very little work getting done, as most of the band spent that time partying. They did finally buckle down and finish things on the record. As Warrant was wrapping up the recording of their second album, producer Beau Hill told the group that he didn't hear a hit song. These were also words that were echoed by their label head Don Ienner, who wanted to hear something in the same vein as Def Leppard's Pour Some Sugar on Me. Within 24 hours, Lane returned with the song Cherry Pie, and the label loved it so much they changed the name of the group's second album from Uncle Tom's Cabin to Cherry Pie.
She's my cherry pie, cool drink of water, such a sweet surprise, tastes so good.
Cherry Pie's title track featured a solo by Poison's CeCe DeVille. But producer Beau Hill wasn't happy working with CeCe on Cherry Pie, remarking he did it for one reason and one reason only, referring to Jani Lane, to integrate himself with CeCe so that Warrant could go on tour with Poison. I believe that got accomplished, but sitting in the studio with CeCe was the most painful experience of my life. CeCe on a good day would never come up to my standards of something I would want to put my name on and release to the public, but I bent over backwards to accommodate the greater good, if you will. Warrant returned with their second record titled Cherry Pie on September 11th, 1990. This was almost 1 year before Nirvana released their groundbreaking record Nevermind. The lead single, the title track, proved to be a massive hit, peaking at number 10 on the Hot 100 chart and propelled the album to go double platinum. The success of the song was bittersweet for Lane, who became known as the Cherry Pie Guy, and felt that the success of the song overshadows his and Warrant's career, as he told VH1 here.
And all of a sudden, the album's called Cherry Pie, the record's called Cherry Pie, I'm doing cherry pie eating contests, the single's Cherry Pie, right? If I'm lying, I'm dying. And my legacy's Cherry Pie. Everything about me is cherry pie. I'm a cherry pie guy. I could shoot myself in the head for writing that song.
But I should note that later on, Lane walked back his comments, claiming that when he sat down with VH1, he was going through a lot of things in his life, putting out a statement that read, "They," referring to the VH1 producers, "just caught me on a bad day. I'm happy as a clam to have written a song that is still being played and still dug by so many people." Cherry Pie was meant to be tongue-in-cheek, with Lane admitting, "We just substituted some words for ones you can't print." Starring in the music video for the song was actress and model Bobbie Brown. She had won a modeling contest for the TV show Talent Search. She had also starred in Great White's video for Once Bitten, Twice Shy. She was hand-selected by Lane, who was single at the time, to do the shoot, and they later ended up dating and getting married and even had a child.
And there is a place in Central chasing after rock stars who are often, well, let's just say they have a few rough edges. We sent downtown Julie Brown to investigate what some are calling the Beauty and the Beast syndrome.
Hunter is a honcho at Ford Models, which has many girls on their roster who have hooked up with rock stars. I think they've got similar demands on each other, so I think that's what makes it work.
I never really set out to marry a model. I mean, I've set out to sleep with models. I never set out to marry a model. That was about the last thing on my mind.
They now have a baby girl.
I actually saw her on Star Search. I didn't know exactly how to go about meeting her, so I thought, well, you know, we're going to do this video for the new record that's coming out. This might be a good opportunity. So I found out who her agency was and called him up and asked her if we could meet.
He was interesting to me, but I had a boyfriend.
Yeah.
So I wasn't a cheater, but, you know, when we broke up, he asked me out, and I said yes.
Yeah.
I think it can help the model's career by the PR because it gives them a lot of exposure.
There are the dreaded groupies.
I know he gets hit on by women, or there's fans or groupies or whatever you want to call it that would do anything to get backstage or to meet the singer of the band or whatever. And you just got to say, you know, he's my husband, I trust him, I know he wants to be with me, we're in love, and he would never do anything like that. And if he did, we wouldn't be together.
But according to Lane's bandmates, his relationship with Brown proved to hurt Warrant. Guitarist Joey Allen recalled in Nothing But a Good Time, "In the long run, I think Jani's relationship with Bobbie caused more damage to the band than egos or anything. Jani left a tour in Europe with David Lee Roth because he heard Bobbie was driving around in his Mercedes with some guy in a local LA band, which she was. They were both promiscuous and infidels, and one infidel meets another infidel, and you can imagine the fireworks that brings on. The pair ended up getting divorced in 1993. The album also had a slew of other successful singles, including I Saw Red, which peaked at number 10 on the Hot 100 chart and 14 on the mainstream rock tracks chart.
I don't think I'm gonna love you anymore.
The third single, Uncle Tom's Cabin, peaked at 78 on the Hot 100 chart and 19 on the mainstream rock tracks chart.
No secret that I just can't tell. No secret down in Uncle Tom's Cabin.
The fourth and final single, Blind Faith, peaked at number 88 on the Hot 100 chart and number 39 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The record went on to be certified double platinum, but Warrant received some backlash over the album cover and the lyrical content of the title track. Lane told the Chicago Tribune, "People can call us chauvinist pigs, we expect it. But there are two definitions of chauvinism. One is unfounded loyalty to one's sex. We don't have that. The other definition is having fanatical patriotism towards women, and we do. So go ahead and say we're chauvinists." There's even a tip of the hat to Tipper Gore, the co-founder of the PMRC, or the Parents Music Resource Center, with the track Ode to Tipper Gore, which sees the band members spouting off vulgarities for nearly a minute. The album Cherry Pie also helped the band with male audiences. Lane admitted that prior to Cherry Pie, the band was known for mostly having female audiences whose ages range from 12 to 18. Lane added to the Chicago Tribune, "We want to draw as many guys as possible, so our new record is more mature." Some fans even noted with songs like Uncle Tom's Cabin, it was foreshadowing the harder rocking sound we'd see on the group's follow-up 1992's Dog Eat Dog. The tour to support Cherry Pie saw Warrant take their inebriated extremes to new heights. Despite 1991 being a really bad year for the concert business thanks to the recession, and while many bands opted to stay home, Warrant decided to headline their own shows, and they did pretty good business. Coming up with something called a value-added tour, which a lot of bands were doing at the time, Warrant hit the road with Firehouse and Trickster, charging $13.50 per ticket. Not bad compared to today's concert prices. Despite being loved by fans, though, some critics seem to have it out for the group. The band's detractors dismissed them as part of a scene that was oversaturated with too many clones. Cherry Pie also proved to be one of the final big records from the glam era before grunge took over. By 1992, Warrant returned with their third record, Dog Eat Dog. The name was taken from a Ted Nugent song. Warrant had actually opened for Ted Nugent early in their career. Dog Eat Dog was also their first collaboration with Skid Row producer Michael Wagner. Lane's songwriting took on a more serious tone, with tracks like April 2031 being about self-destruction, while Andy Warhol Was Right dealt with how everyone gets their 15 minutes of fame. Bridges Are Burning dealt with drug dependency. The album produced one modestly successful single in Machine Gun, which peaked at number 36 on the mainstream rock tracks chart. The album ended up going gold, a significant decline from their past efforts as the music scene had changed. Lane recalled at the time, "I'll never forget walking into Columbia Records president Don Einer's office, seeing the huge poster of Alice in Chains' Dirt over his secretary's desk, and I thought, hello Seattle, goodbye Warrant." I also want to mention that there was a gig that Warrant played in Seattle in 1989, and opening for them at that show was, yes, Alice in Chains. According to guitarist Eric Turner, while Warrant received a lot of love from fans on their first two records, frontman Jani Lane didn't get a ton of respect from his peers. So with their third record, Dog Eat Dog, he wanted to prove that he could write songs that were on more serious topics, and he also started to listen to some different bands like Mother Love Bone around this time. As Warrant hit the road to support their third record, they noticed a change in their crew size and the venues they were playing. They went from having 4 semis to 2, and they stopped playing arenas and started playing smaller venues like theaters. During this period, Lane's marriage was falling apart and his drinking only got worse. Couple this with the news that Vince Neil had left Motley Crue to pursue a solo career, and Lane wanted to follow in his footsteps. The band was soon notified that their frontman was having issues with his throat, but at the same time, he was in talks to start a solo career and opted to leave the band. This was just on the eve of Warrant signing a big merchandising contract that saw them get a huge advance that they'd have to pay back playing 50 or so shows. The timing seemed awful, and the group was soon dropped by Columbia Records, and the merchandising company sued the group. But within 6 months, Lane was back in the band, and they had a new label in indie outfit CMC International. Joey Allen summed up just how far the band had fallen, recalling, "We were at a Sony Grammy party in LA right after Dog Eat Dog came out. Don Einer was there, Mariah Carey was there, Tommy Mottola is there, everyone is there. It's like 1992 and Seattle is starting to come out, and Pearl Jam's record 10 is just killer. So I had a few drinks in me, and I bumped into Rick Krim, an executive with MTV, and I pulled out every credit card in my wallet and all the cash I had and put it in my hand and said, 'Please play my video.' He looked at me and said, 'I wish I could, but it's not up to me.' Up until then, it was a good relationship between MTV and Warrant." The group hobbled along and continued to put out albums with Lane through the rest of the 90s and early 2000s before he left again in 2004. He briefly reunited with the group in 2008 and also went on to front Great White. Sadly, he passed away in 2011 due to acute alcohol poisoning. Warrant is still around to this day, albeit with a new frontman, and they've also continued to put out new records. That does it for today's video, guys. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again in Rock Culture Stories. Take care.